Hi, folks. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm so inspired to hear what my colleagues across arts and sciences are doing. My name is Aarti Smith-Madan. I'm in the Department of Humanities and Arts, and I teach Spanish and everything related to that. So I work in the field of cultural geography in Latin America, and whether I'm thinking about past or present, I'm thinking about the notion of space. And I'm not talking about space like NASA space, but rather land, right? I'm thinking about it in literature, art, and film in particular. So questions like who demarcates land and how, who occupies territories and where, who describes places and why. And I think about these questions in particular as they relate to matters of gender, race, and environment. I explore a lot of these issues in my first book, which came out in 2017. It's called The Lines of Geography in Latin American Narrative, National Territory, National Literature, so a bit of a mouthful. But it digs down into the literary roots of 19th century geography in two areas, Argentina and Brazil in particular. And it all started with one pretty straightforward question. Why were Latin America's most canonical 19th century literary writers so obsessed with the discipline of geography? The writers that I'm working with, Domingo Faustino Sarmiento from Argentina, Estanislao Severo Ceballos, also from Argentina, and Euclides da Cunha from Brazil, these are kind of the Emersons, the Thoreaus, the Whitmans of Latin America. They're the ones included in every anthology, the ones who described every nook and cranny and crevasse of their countries in really exquisite poetic detail. But at end, what I argue in my book is that these were very political projects that were about freedom from colonial powers. So whereas the United States won independence in 1776, so late 18th century, things happened a bit later in Latin America. We're talking Brazil gaining independence from Portugal in 1825, Argentina gaining independence from Spain in 1816. So in this period, after becoming independent nation states, they still had to define themselves as countries. And that was quite difficult to do, really painful, because we're talking about these huge territories. You can see the numbers up there. But it's not just about geography, which is a disparate, very diverse geography of mountains and rivers and lakes, et cetera, how to connect and consolidate these massive spaces. But we're also thinking about plural subjects, lots of diversity of people. We have the so-called civilized Europeans who colonized the territory, the so-called barbaric indigenous inhabitants who had always been there, and then the over 12 million African slaves who had defied the horrors of Middle Passage and had been settled in Latin America. So the question is, how are we going to consolidate these territories? And what I show in my book is that these writers used literature, the marriage between literature and geography, in these really canonical texts, Facundo, Os Sertões, and La Conquista de 15,000 Leguas, to really help create nation states and identities. But they did so by bringing in one other important piece, and that is institutions. They created, all three men were really fundamental in creating the nation's first geographical institutions. So what I show is that this alignment between institutions and literary writing and the geographic discipline really harkens back to the etymology of geography, which is earth writing. Writing the earth became synonymous at once with writing the nation. Part of what I show in my book is that what these writers were doing was creating a dialogue between what they were forming as an authentic Latin American style of writing in dialogue with German naturalists in particular, Alexander von Humboldt, which we'll be hearing about a bit later, but other North American and European naturalists and science writers. What I've been doing lately is kind of a radical departure from writing about dead old white men. I'm actually thinking about women of color. And it has been such a fun change because of many reasons, but in particular because I'm working on these two very up-and-coming street artists, Shaila Shiv Suleiman from India and Pamela Castro from Brazil. And I'm thinking about space now, but as related to art. And I'm thinking about it in two very specific ways. How have urban art and social activism merged to allow women to reclaim city space? And how has street art advanced a pan-Indigenous environmental movement? So in my mind, the work that these women are doing is kind of essential to creating some sort of public consciousness about the liberating potential of art, because these women aren't just creating art. They are actually using art in a participatory way to empower young women of color with their craft. So in a way, this goes back to space, about creating space for women who have never had it, women who are kind of resigned to live on the margins, but have now been brought to the center. So if we think about that in the terms of Arts and Sciences Week, the three driving questions have been, or the terms have been imagine, innovate, and impact. What I show in my work on these women is that there's another I that they have been working with, and that is intersectionality. These women have been intersectional feminists long before the word became the word du jour. And to my mind, what we're seeing here is Latin American studies as global studies. These trans-Pacific encounters show us that the world is more connected than disconnected, more global than hemispheric, and art and literature, I think, ultimately are absolutely essential to this endeavor. So with that, I thank you.